The hyperinflation blueprint, what really happened and who got really rich. And I should probably say who got really rich, because yes, indeed, there were some people, a very select few, who positioned themselves incredibly well during these periods of hyperinflation. And while the rest of the society was crumbling and people were experiencing tremendous and immense pain, these people did make a lot of money. So I want to go over the case studies over the past 100 years. We're going to specifically focus on the 6 biggest ones for major world powers and how it kind of correlates in today's world, and then of course how you know what sort of lessons you can take from that to apply and perhaps even profit from potential situations like this in the future, or maybe not even potential situations like this or exactly like this in the future, but even similar situations like this, because there are a lot of corollaries to what's going on right now. But I won't go into full-on doom porn or nothing like that. For just full like point analysis right here. No, the US is not in hyperinflation as of right now. Are there some signs, that it's a possibility? Perhaps yes, but as of right now, no, it is not happening, and it's actually still, rather far away. But it's something worth preparing for, because if it does indeed happen, here is a playbook of how to profit significantly. And also, I want to address something before we get into the content of this video as well. Look, just because some people did profit from this phenomenon of hyperinflation does not make them a bad person. Look, hyperinflation was going to happen whether they were profiting from it or not. These were just regular people, or maybe not regular people, but they were investors, perhaps like you or myself, and they were not necessarily, responsible for the actual hyperinflation. They just positioned themselves well to actually take advantage of it, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, let's actually go into what hyperinflation realistically looks like, and I want to give you some scenarios here, and I really want to draw you into what this feels like, and we're going to look at a lot of pictures of real people during these times, because, a lot of the time, like, we watch these videos, we listen to these stories, and then, 2 seconds later, we just go about our regular day. That's natural, of course, but I really want you to immerse yourself as if you were one of these people experiencing this insane amount of pain, to use that as power to make the right decisions in the future, because there are a lot of right decisions that you could start making right now. And I'll explain exactly what I'm doing at the end of this video as well. Anyways, the classic example of hyperinflation would be, what if your life savings couldn't buy a loaf of bread anymore? What if it couldn't buy basically anything? What if you got paid in the morning and your money was essentially worthless by dinner? The inflation was going up so much that intraday they would have to change prices of things because the currency was collapsing so fucking rapidly. And I just want to, again, hammer on the point that this has happened already. We've seen this many times in the past 100 years. In fact, 16 times in major world countries. Repeatedly to modern, educated, urban populations who thought they lived in stable systems. And I just want to hammer on that point so much, man. We look at our current situation as just static and it's unchanged and, everything's all good. And yeah, things are still mostly good right now. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but still, compared to the overwhelming majority of just disastrous cases in history, yeah, it ain't that fucking bad, okay? To be quite clear, and I think that you'll come to the same conclusion after studying this history as well. But anyways, this phenomenon of that currency collapse is known as hyperinflation. And to give it a more defined definition, it's not just high inflation, which is what the U.S. has had, actually, especially after 2020. The money printing that happened during that time did lead to very high inflation, which, yes, was problematic. And if that did, really carry on for another few years, it could have actually put us into, or us in the U.S., into an unreconcilable hole, or at least that's kind of how I would interpret it with the knowledge that I have right now. But what hyperinflation specifically is it is technically 50% of inflation per month in price growth, 50% per month price growth. So 50% inflation month over month, basically. Economically, a collapse in confidence in the currency itself is what it amounts to. People just no longer look at the currency as relevant. It's literally just pieces of paper, and they no longer have any real value. Anyways, moving on from there, here are the 16 instances of severe hyperinflation since the 1900s. So a little bit over a year here. We're not going to go through each and every one of these. I will specifically go over the 6 most important ones and like the classic cases of hyperinflation. But if you want to read more about them, here's the ones to kind of focus on. You got Germany, the Weimar Republic in 1921. You got Hungary in 1945, right after World War II. You got Greece also during World War II in 1941. China right after World War II in 1947. Taiwan in 1945, again, right after World War II. Israel in 1983 and 1985. This one was a lot less extreme, I should say, but technically it did qualify as hyperinflation. Yugoslavia in 1992, so a lot more recent, I should add as well. Peru in 1988 to 1990. Argentina, they've been fucked multiple times, to be honest. But you got 1979, 1989, and 1990. Bolivia in 1984. Brazil in 1980s and early 1990s. You got Nicaragua in the 1980s. Poland, Ukraine, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, all in the past 20 to 30 years. So again, this is not something that, happened well far in the past and we're never going to see it again. No, this happens to real countries, even likely in your lifetime. I mean, I know the average age of this channel is in the mid 30s, like myself as well. And I would say if you've been around for about 35 years, you've seen many of these. You just didn't know. You just weren't aware because you probably weren't paying attention, as I was not as well until recent times when I started studying this stuff. Started studying this stuff. Anyways, I just want to highlight the picture on the left-hand side here. It's just a classic example of what you do see during these times. So we'll see many pictures of real people during these times. But in 1923, Germany, hyperinflation was so extreme that a wheelbarrow of cash couldn't buy bread by day's end. And people burned money for heat because it was cheaper than firewood. Like, think of it that way. You're burning your literal cash for firewood because that has more value than just having the actual fucking cash. Kind of crazy when you put it that way. And it actually even highlights the point of what actually is valuable in the end. Hyperinflation refers to the currency basically becoming worthless. But what does it become worthless against? The currency itself actually doesn't really have much of value. It has to be measured against something. So it is the denominator, the thing that it is being measured against, that actually has the value. And that's a quick insight into, who really will be winning big during these times. But there's also other ways to win big, I should add as well. Things that you probably wouldn't have expected, in fact. But anyways, you got 3 different tiers of hyperinflation. We're going to just go over tier number 1. But tier number 2 is important as well. It's just less, visually dramatic, so I didn't want to include it. And then tier number 3 is like more modern currency failure, but it actually doesn't necessarily have hyperinflation. It's just a currency failure with a loss of confidence in that currency. Anyways, let's get into our first example here. This was the one that probably most people are familiar with. It's Weimar Germany. It is effectively referred to as the prototype. This was between the periods of 1921 to 1923. I also want to add that during this time, Germany, was coming out of World War I. They had some pretty nasty reparations and just, realistically, or I should say unrealistically, imposed sanctions against them to the point where, they just, it was almost like, why even fucking try? Because it's impossible. But anyways, let's get into the lead up here. So we'll go over the lead up. We'll go over what it meant for the average day person, and then, what sort of lessons we can get from that, basically. And I'm going to take a sip of this water. And by the way, you don't necessarily need to watch these presentations. You can look at this as more as a podcast. This is just really for like the, full-on financial nerds. But I've been really enjoying making these, these sort of more, I guess, podcast style type things. Let me know if you like it. If you do like it, just let me know by actually liking the video and perhaps even subscribing as well. We'll continue on with this series as I get topics when they come to me. Anyways, one moment. Okay, there we go. All right, so the lead up, how a modern state destroyed its money. Germany enters World War I on a borrow now, win later model. Sounds very similar. The government doesn't raise taxes enough. It borrows and prints, building up a debt of 156 billion marks by 1918, which is a lot of money in that time, by the way. After losing the war, Versailles reparations add another 50 billion marks. So they basically just added what, like a third more, 30, they took 30% of their already existing debt and added another 30% on top. I mean, it's too much for them already. They had no realistic way to pay it back. Payable largely in foreign currencies and goods, not paper marks. So that's also very key here too. Basically, they had to pay in a foreign currency. They couldn't actually use their marks to pay it off, which makes sense. I get what the Allies were doing in this case. But in hindsight, using this as a lesson going forwards, when you do win a war against an adversary, you can't be so punitive to the point where you just absolutely destroy them because, well, here's what happens next. Anyways, industrial capacity is damaged. Political instability is constant. In 1921, the Reichstag begins buying foreign currency at any price with paper marks to pay reparations. So basically, they print as much of their paper marks as possible to buy the foreign currency, which has somewhat of a value so that they could maybe pay off some of this debt, further undermining the mark. The mark, again, is their native currency at the time. As inflation picks up, the political choice is brutal. You either cut spending hard, so austerity, which angers voters, of course. No one likes losing their benefits, my old good benefits. Or their other choice was to print to keep promises and hope to grow out of it. A little bit more optimistic there, but in this case, I think that the hole was a little bit too big. Anyways, they decide to print, and once people understand that printing is the default, confidence in the market itself breaks. I just want to stop here for a moment to acknowledge a similarity between what happened here and the U.S. right now. So the U.S. right now is in severe debt as well. And it's a little more complicated, and it's different than Germany fundamentally. However, this part is not that different. The U.S. right now realizes that it has a debt issue, and there is a lot of political talk of paying down the debt and what this essentially looks like. And it seems to me that the current administration, the Trump administration, has a plan to reduce the debt, and it is more or less what Germany did, or at least tried to do, and they are going to effectively run the economy hot and hope to grow our way out of the debt, meaning that, we grow the economy so much that we just make so much money from that, and we're just able to pay off the debt while also devaluing the currency. It's a plan, and to be honest, austerity, cutting spending hard, has been proven over and over and over and over and over again many times, as we'll go through later on in this, in this analysis, to not work, or at least I haven't seen it work in any way that I would want to live through. I'll put it this way, but it's a plan. Now the real question is, can the U.S. have the capability to do this? The U.S. does have all the capital markets, does have all the technology, or most of it at least. So perhaps there's more of a chance there. But yeah, it is a real risk, and the statistics historically not that great. So it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that it will work. In fact, there are many instances where it does not work. Anyways, exchange rate progression. So here's kind of an idea of how fast this thing devalued their currency. Mid 1922, it was about 320 marks, German marks, per $1 US. Okay, I mean that's pretty fucking bad. But once you get to December of 2022, so we're talking about 5-6 months later, then it was 7,400 marks per USD. That's more than that's about a 20x, or that's more than a 20x markup. That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah, over 20x markup in less than a year, in literally about half of a year. By November of 2023, so fast forwarding almost a year more from then it just explodes into, it's like, why even mention the number? But it's 4.21 trillion with a T, not even a billion, not even a million, but a trillion with a T marks per USD. Look, to give you an idea of how big the number trillion is, I can't even count that high. I can't even count to a fucking million probably, let alone a billion or a trillion. I mean, look, there are 1,000 millions in 1 billion, and 1,000 billions in 1 trillion. So it's up at this point. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. It's worthless. It quite literally is not even worth the paper that is printed on. It probably costs more for that paper, literally, to create that mark. Anyways, at one point, prices doubled every few days. Again, just while you go upon your normal day shopping today, imagine that you're buying the same thing in a few days and it's double the price. I mean, shit, man. People were complaining, and look, complaining rightfully so, by the way, when prices doubled from, the coronavirus incident in 2020. A few years later, in 2022 to 2023, prices did, more or less double from that time span. But that was over the course of 3 to 4 years where we really saw that set in, and that was very painful for many people. Imagine that happening every 2 to 3 days, multiple times over. It just becomes it's unmanageable. Anyways, this is the core pattern. Debt plus external obligations plus political cowardice plus printing equals monetary suicide. Anyways, why mod Germany? Again, what it meant for the average person. So I really want you to imagine that you are this person. This is how I view this content, at least. The middle class savings evaporated pretty much instantly. People who worked 30 years suddenly had nothing. So imagine you've been storing your money, storing your cash, storing your marks, storing your dollars for the last 30 years. Most of you haven't probably even been alive for 30 years. But imagine you were working every fucking year that you were alive. all of that becomes completely worthless. Pensions are worthless. Old people literally starve despite being paid. Again, you're getting your money. It's just it's worth nothing at this point. Wages lost value by the hour, which is even crazier. Workers ran from factories to the bakery during lunch because afternoon prices were higher. Professionals became poor overnight. Teachers, clerks, engineers, all wiped out. Hunger and malnutrition spread even though food existed. Prices were simply astronomical. You couldn't buy it. It was too much. Crime exploded naturally. This is where things get scary. Theft of coal, bread, shoes became normal. Theft of just everything became normal. I mean, when people have no other option, yeah, they are going to turn to that naturally. No one wants to just fucking give up and die. They're going to try at least something typically. Of course, there are some people who just gave up, to which suicides did indeed increase. Very, very sad and very, it is despair, at that point, you just don't see another way out. I get it. But men who could no longer support their families often chose death. I mean, if you are a young man watching this, or if you're a middle-aged man or even an old man watching this, when you have a family, you feel the necessity or at least you feel like it is one of the jobs of your role to provide for your family. It's, you are there to make sure that everything is stable. That is, what the paternal instinct is. Anyways, women sold anything that they had, including their wedding rings, furniture, or in dark cases themselves. Very, very common, very, very classic. The most long-running, of course, job in all of human history is prostitution, and that is a natural way that women can kind of support themselves. It's necessity, I suppose, at that point. And this was just middle-class annihilation, not poor people suffering. Again, most of us are middle class by definition, and unfortunately, when the middle class dies, when the middle class evaporates, things are going terribly. So it is my belief, especially after studying all this content, you must in a healthy society prioritize the middle class being robust and stable. And most importantly, the middle class must believe that their children can at least have the opportunity to have a better position financially in the future than themselves. That means the kids have to progress past the parents. That's basically evolution already. But, that is really the essence of the middle class, is you really have that opportunity to progress. And that is, and what has been, the sort of American dream in the past. It's like, you can come to America, you can work, you can work hard, make your living, buy a house, you start investing in that, and then you actually, create wealth. And then your kids can carry that on, and because they already have a house, they're able to build more upon that, and they can, create more generational wealth, and that gets built upon, and creates just more existing wealth over time, for more and more people, which is generally a good thing. But right now in today's world, that isn't as much, it's not as much of a done deal as it was in the past. In the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, that really was very, very likely that your kids are going to do better than you. In today's world, it's more like it's closer to 50-50 at this point, unfortunately. So if there's one thing that I could say that would help, revive the system, it's that prioritize middle class, make sure that their kids can and do have a high probability of surpassing their parents if they do put in the work, if they do, really focus on being productive. Anyways, that's the point that I want to make, and I'm taking another sip of this water right here. So again, everyday life, how the average German suffered. Imagine you're a middle-class clerk in Berlin. Your father saved for decades in war bonds and bank deposits, all gone in under 2 years. A loaf of bread that costs over 160 marks at the end of 1922, cost 200 billion marks by late 1923. Again, it's worthless at this point. Your salary is paid weekly, then daily, then twice a day, because by night the morning wage buys less. Restaurants stop printing menus because prices change between ordering and eating, which is even more crazy. One anecdote: a man buys one coffee for 5,000 marks. His second cost 9,000 minutes later. I don't know why I left the. I actually documented where I got this information. When this one was from Reddit, but I don't know why I left that in. I usually delete these. But yeah, people push wheelbarrows of cash to buy basic to buy basic goods. Thieves sometimes steal the barrow and dump the money, which is crazy. That actually has value. Again, an insight into what actually has value, the asset itself. Pensioners who did everything right are reduced to begging. Skilled professionals, teachers, engineers, doctors are pauperized. It's the annihilation of the middle class. So again, I just want to acknowledge here, and you'll see this a lot. Savers get fucked, and we said this in prior videos in this series. Savers get fucked. You save as a pensioner, you get fucked. Skilled professionals, you get fucked. You save your money in marks or in bonds or anything like this. You're loaning out money. You are getting absolutely fucking bent over and rammed without any recourse to that. Emotionally, shame. Men can't support families. I mean, that's, again, one of the worst things, as a man when you do actually have a family. Rage. People feel betrayed by the system naturally. I mean, I get it. At that point, of course, you're naturally going to turn your anger towards a system which has made such disastrous decisions to cause this scenario. And despair. Suicide rates rise. Political extremism follows naturally. So, as you already know, about 10 years later, that's when Nazism comes around. I could do a whole fucking video series on Nazism as well. It's actually super interesting, the way that it came around, because there's such like a small amount of people. It was only like 3%, really, who were like actually on board with the party, but they got into power and then they just took over. But anyways, this sort of an event does breed extremism, because naturally, that's going to be the next response. It's like, hey, this doesn't work. What else can we try? Let's do some extreme. We need to do something extreme naturally to get out of this disastrous situation. So who actually won big in this scenario, and how? So a very small minority came out massively ahead. Aggressive borrowers in marks. So basically, if you took out loans in marks, well, you just won fucking big, because guess what? The currency hyperinflated so much that you can afford to pay it back with basically pennies later on, because the currency is nearly worthless, even just minutes or at most like another day or two later. That's kind of my point here. If you borrow money, yeah, you got to pay it back, but it's just so worthless at this point that it's a lot easier to pay it back. Industrialists and property owners who took large mark-denominated debts, especially before the worst inflation, saw their real debt burden go to almost zero. They repaid mortgages and loans with confetti money, more or less. Owners of real estate like farmlands, factories, rental real estate, and businesses with tangible output did do really, really well during this time. So basically, they had the means of production. As the mark collapsed, these assets retained real value and could be repriced naturally. So exporters and foreign currency earners, of course, won big. So if you are, working remotely, getting paid in US dollars, and then you can convert that into, shitty ass, German marks, then that's going to, do very, very well for you, because that US dollar is remaining rather constant. The mark is not. So that was one way. And what else? Yes, businesses paid in pounds or dollars but paying costs in marks crush it. Yes, those who converted early into foreign currency or gold. So the people who kind of understood what was happening earlier on, the decisions that they made was to trade their German marks for a foreign currency like the US dollar, or for gold. Both, probably pretty good at this point. Most currencies at this point were also backed by gold anyways. So people who moved savings into gold, Swiss francs, dollars, preserved, and often multiplied their relative purchasing power. So that is a super tangible way that pretty much anyone listening to this can do, whether it be gold, whether it be another currency. I don't know if you necessarily want to go to another currency, or Bitcoin, or just another hard asset. These sort of things really do shine during these periods, because the actual fiat currency just it inflates to next to nothing in terms of value. The denominator is the value, which is gold or Bitcoin or whatever asset you might be looking at. Could be a stock as well, but maybe that's a little bit less, solid. Anyways, investor lessons from the Weimar to the West today. Don't be the middle class saver sitting on cash and local currency bonds. Like if you're hoarding a lot of money in your bank account, historically you don't do quite well. In fact, that is a very risky position. First, you're already getting killed by, whatever small inflation that is always going on. But if hyperinflation does come, yeah, that goes to basically zero, more or less. This is the group that history most consistently destroys. It's very, 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 very nasty. Leverage in a debasing currency can be a weapon if you pair it with real assets and can survive volatility. if, again, I wouldn't necessarily suggest taking on leverage during these times. Just introduces, it's like a chink in the arm, right? Introduces a little bit of fragility, which can be exploited during these times. Having part of your net worth in non-sovereign or external assets, gold, Bitcoin, foreign equities, foreign currency, is not paranoia. It's statistically rational. This is, the easiest way that most people win big. And politicians will almost always sacrifice a currency before they sacrifice a system, just as a sort of historical normality. That's what we see. Anyways, next we'll go on to Hungary. This was right after World War II in 1945 and 1946. I actually lived in Hungary for summer one time. I really liked it. In fact, Budapest. But you can see the pain that is still there from the end of World War II and this scenario that we're about to go over. And of course, the Soviet system that did follow. And this lovely lady just smoking off her, I don't know if they're using the forint at this time, but whatever their currency was called. When I was there, it was called the forint. I know it was also kind of like monopoly currency. And anyways, like $20 was like, I don't know, 1,000 or 6,000 forint, something like this. And this was back in, I don't know, like this was at least 10 years ago. So it's probably worse now. Anyways, the lead up to this situation, by the way, just want to point out the graphic on the left-hand side here. If you're just listening, there's a guy who is sweeping his fiat currencies along the street as if it's, well, worthless, because it is. Anyways, the lead up to this war, devastation, no tax base. Hungary is smashed by World War II. Again, when I was there, like, you can still see the damage from World War II literally in the billions. Just bullet holes, shit blown apart. It is still there. It's not that much, but yeah, it is still definitely there if you look for it. Anyways, Hungary is smashed by World War II. Infrastructure destroyed. Cities bombed. Productive capacity is wrecked. Reparations and occupation costs owed to the Soviet Union stack on top of domestic needs. Hungary allied with Germany during this time. So they were a natural enemy of the Soviets, and they kind of treated them in a very punitive manner after winning the war. Tax collection collapses. Real output is crippled. The state can't raise enough revenue in any honest way, basically. The government keeps paying. And by the way, that's because a lot of the men were, killed during this time. And there's just not enough people being productive. Or it's not even that they weren't productive, like they just couldn't be productive because the system wasn't there for them to really do this. Anyways, the government keeps paying wages, pensions, and obligations by issuing more pengo. So that's what their currency was called during this time. It wasn't the forint, but the pengo, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it. They have a crazy language, by the way, as well. It's one of the hardest languages to learn, in fact. So basically they printed money to pay, government wages, pensions, these sort of things, your general social benefits. As prices explode, they attempt partial fixes. For example, a 75% capital levy in December 1945, but of course they keep printing. So hyperinflation peaks in July 1946, about 1.5 years after the initial sort of initial sort of catalyst towards this event. Prices are rising at 41.9 quadrillion % per month. Didn't think that number was coming, did you? Quadrillion. I didn't even know what that. I guess that's the number that comes after trillion. Quadrillion. So that'd be like four, so you got trillion, which is 3, billion, which is 2, million, which is 1. Yeah, so quadrillion would be 4. It's just insane, man. Again, just at that point, it doesn't matter what the inflation is. It is literally worth nothing. And that was doubling every 15 hours. So less than 1 day, less than 1 day, a little over half of 1 day. In fact, it's doubling. It's insane, just fucking insane. Again, this isn't oops. It's what happens when you destroy productive capacity and then try to paper over reality with money. This also kind of hits home for the U.S. right now. The U.S. has taken away a lot of its productive capacity, offshoring it to many different nations, especially in Asian countries. And what do? Instead, they paper over reality with money. In a way, yes. Again, it's certainly not anywhere near as severe in the U.S. as that is right now, but you can see some similarities here and there. So it's like there is a risk of this. I'm not saying it's happening right now. It is not happening right now, but there is a risk of it. And again, the way to prepare for it is more or less the same as to how to generate wealth just in general anyways. So anyways, everyday life for the average person, what it looks like on the ground. A shop sets prices in the morning. By afternoon, those prices are a joke. Like they are too low. They need to be fucking doubled or tripled or whatever. Salaries have to be paid twice a day in some contexts just to keep up. People rush from payday to the store because waiting 24 hours is financial suicide. Again, it's hyperinflating so fast, you have to spend it right there. It also kind of makes me wonder, is that a correlation to this sort of idea of programmable money and this sort of idea that, perhaps in the European Union, they want to have programmable money through a CBDC and then also have it have like an expiration date. I believe Australia is also looking at this as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's definitely worth it looking into, but I believe I have seen this from these sort of economic zones. And you kind of wonder, is that an allegory to what's going on here? Your money's basically worthless a little bit later. Obviously, one is planned versus one is just disastrously managed, but the result's kind of the same. Your money is just worthless, after a certain amount of time. Just thinking out loud right now. Anyways. Yes, workers and retirees see their incomes by less and less every single day. No planning, no saving, just survival. Farmers refuse the fiat currency there, the pango. They demand goods, services, or foreign currency. So it's almost like a barter system at that point. And in cities, people starve despite there being food in the countryside because their money just isn't accepted by these farmers. And you can't really blame the farmers. Like, why would you accept something that's worthless for something that has a worth? I mean, what would you do in that situation? Anyway, psychologically, money stops being future security and becomes just a hot potato. It's a liability almost in a way. Trust in the state never really recovers. The memory of worthless money lasts generations. And yeah, you definitely still feel it even today when I was there. It's, you definitely feel that there's a lot of, hangover from this period. One more sip and we're good to go yet again. All right. So who won? Who won realistically? There were very few massive winners during this time. This was closer to total trauma than Weimar's industrialist bonanza. But there were, a few winners. People who shifted early into real assets. So they bought land, livestock, durable goods, machinery. They did well. They could continue to trade in things people actually needed during that time. So like they had a forced buyer basically. Those with foreign assets or foreign currency. So if you held dollars, Swiss francs, even cigarettes had value in this case, or at least held their value. Anyone with relatives abroad who could send money in hard currency was dramatically better off. Those who quickly embraced the new currency, and again, I just want to highlight that statement because in those days it was very difficult to trade your currency for another currency, in a foreign land. It's not like today where everything's very connected. You can just go on your fucking brokerage and do that relatively easily. Anyways, those who quickly embraced the new currency after stabilization, when the forint replaced the pengo in August 1946, those who could pivot quickly into the new regime and start fresh had an advantage. Sorry. Investor lessons, hungry to today. If a government wrecks productive capacity, whether it be through war, nationalization, energy suicide, no amount of printing can fix that. That's how you get Hungary and Zimbabwe-style outcomes, which we'll go over a little bit later with Zimbabwe. When the money system is visibly dying, goods themselves become money. Again, your money is only worth something because it can buy something else. And that the other thing is what has value. The The denominator is what has value. Anyways, yes, owning productive assets beats owning claims on paper. So of course, it's not just you don't want to buy anything. Like if you just buy something that, is going to spoil tomorrow, that's not a great investment. But buying a productive asset, whether you buy like a fucking, part of a business or like a dividend yield income, or well, actually that's not going to work too well because the income from your dividend is not going to be worth much. But something that produces something else, becomes very, very attractive during these times. Those who acted early, diversified abroad, and refused to sit in a dying currency had the best outcomes. Hesitation killed people financially and, also literally too. China. So China's our next one. This is from the late 1940s, and this is covering the Fabi and the gold yuan. You can see a bunch of people trying to break into, into whatever area to get their money from. Right there, looks very fucking fun. Anyways, and then a cute little Chinese girl on the left-hand side there, holding a massive amount of money, which is probably not worth much at all, in fact. Anyways, the lead up here, war, civil war, and Fabi's collapse. In 1935, the nationalist government introduced the Fabi, which was the legal currency there. I'm probably mispronouncing this, by the way, so just FABI is how you say it. It initially functioned normally. The Second Sino-Japanese War from 1937 to 1945, basically World War II, forces huge military spending in China, financed with massive Fabi issuance. After World War II, the Chinese Civil War resumes. The government prints even more to fund the war against the communists. And Fabi supply explodes from 1.4 billion before the war to trillions after by 1948. Issuance had reached hundreds of trillion. Inflation becomes hyperinflation. Prices are constantly rising and confidence collapses. So again, this is an example of one war leading to another war. So you had World War II, and then you had a civil war after that because the communists were fighting, I guess it wasn't necessarily capitalist, but just, I guess, more Western friendly regime there. They lost naturally, especially with all this, inflation. It's just too much pressure on the system. I couldn't survive that, and the communists took over. And even worse things happened after that during the Great Leap, during Chairman Mao. Anyways. So to solve this, the government launches a currency reform. In August 19th of 1948, they introduced the gold yuan, supposedly backed by gold and foreign exchange. 1 gold yuan is worth 3 million Fabi. Great. People are forced by decree to surrender gold, silver, and foreign currency at a fixed rate to get a gold yuan. The issuance was supposed to be limited and backed, but they immediately break their own rules and overissue. It's another example of a government making a promise and then breaking it, soon after that. Confidence dies again, but faster, naturally. I mean, at that point, it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, go fuck yourself, right? You know what I mean? Anyways, by late 1948, the gold yuan is collapsing even faster than the Fabi did. Inflation rate estimates run into the 7-digit percentages annually. I mean, again, it doesn't even matter what it is at that point. It's just, it is worthless. It doesn't matter what inflation is at that point. It's not coming back. You can't undo it at that point. It is a collapse. A collapse ensues. A collapse is inevitable at that point, unfortunately. And this monetary chaos accelerates the fall of the nationalist regime and the communist victory. Anyways, moving on from there. Here's what everyday life was like for the urban middle class turned into complete fucking dust. Shanghai, Nanjing, Chongping, I'm probably butchering all these, but imagine being a shopkeeper or an office worker there. You've already lived through years of war and scarcity. In fact, if you haven't heard about the rape of Nanking, it's pretty fucking bad for the Chinese. Just so you know, in World War II, Chinese did very poorly. They got absolutely butt fucked by the Japanese. And I can tell you, still to this day, the Chinese hate the Japanese. And because I met like this Chinese guy one time, he's telling me about all the stuff. He's telling me like how the Chinese always celebrate the day when the U.S. Atomic bombed Japan. Like they fucking hate them. They fucking hate them. So that was awful. And then they had an equally as awful civil war, because civil wars are always just terrible. Anyways, yes. So where was I? You've already lived through years of war and scarcity. You saved in Fabi because it was legal tender. You were promised by the government, hey, your dollars are definitely going to be valuable. So save in that. Haha. Wink, wink. Anyways, your savings are inflated away by that same government. Then you're told, bring your gold and foreign currencies, and we'll give you a new gold yuan backed by reserves. No problem. Anyways, you stand in line with suitcases of notes to swap them. At first, people are hopeful, trusting the government in this case. Then the government prints gold yuan far beyond its backing. Imposes rage and price controls and cracks down on speculators. Prices rocket, your new savings vanish again. Middle-class urban families who had gold, silver, or foreign currencies are forced to surrender them at an official rate. Then watch the new currency collapse. Their wealth is directly confiscated via financial engineering. So it's not like the government came in and like literally took the money out of your hands. No, it just engineered a system in which your wealth no longer exists, and it's not going to exist very soon in the government's hand either. To be fair, because they're just fucking terrible at managing these things. Anyways, Anyways, emotionally, what do people feel? Betrayal would be one. That's a fucking bad one. That's one of the worst of the, or the deadliest of the sins. The exact group that supported the nationalists, the urban middle class, loses everything. So again, nationalism, which leads to like far right type of stuff, and communism, which is far left kind of stuff. It all leads to the same shit: collapse of the system, collapse of faith, collapse of society, and a lot of pain for the people in the middle. It is my very strong belief that if we could just get fucking rid of these two extremes and just force them just go somewhere else, like you guys go make yourselves miserable somewhere else and leave the rest of us fucking alone, we would all be better off, because all major financial collapses throughout history, at least that I've studied in the past 1,000 years, are in some way, in part, due to these two groups of people, the far right and the far left. And everything in the middle is usually like shades of that, and they can kind of coexist. But the guys on the far extremes, at some point they will inevitably get into power, and they fuck it up for everyone else. And it's really awful, and it's really bad. Anyways, the other thing that people felt was disillusionment. Monetary abuse is one key reason the nationalists lose legitimacy and the communists are able to take over. And that just causes even more pain. Again, you already probably know about Mao's Great Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, which starved tens of millions of people, maybe enough to 100 million people. We don't really even know. It was so unbelievably bad. The problem is you probably actually don't know about this, as you don't know so much about the Russian Revolution as well, which led to the communists taking over. For whatever reason, we don't learn that much about it in school. We learn a lot about the Nazis, which is also equally bad. Again, I've looked at them as both equally as fucked up. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, we don't learn about the communists, which is very bizarre. And honestly, I think a big fault of the American education system, because people right now are kind of gravitating a little bit more towards that, just not aware of, what these have led to in the past. And it's been extremely bad. So just say, study your fucking history, man, because you don't learn everything in school. Anyways, who won big in China's hyperinflation? So those who quietly kept or moved wealth offshore into hard assets not easily seized, these guys did okay. People who moved capital to Hong Kong, overseas banks, or into foreign property. But again, at this point, things aren't interconnected as they are right now. It's very, very difficult to access that wealth. You got to store it, but you're still stuck in fucking China. Anyways, merchants who kept their reserves in gold, silver, or foreign currency and did not fully comply with forced exchanges, so basically people who broke the rules, or who did so partially and kept stash hidden. Again, playing outside of the, outside of the rule set. People who owned real businesses and inventory. So again, we see these people do well. Pricing in foreign currency where possible. So this would be import, export merchants, shipping, those able to invoice in US dollars or pounds. They could ride the chaos while others live check to check in a dying currency. Those who got out early, geographically, that is, like literally just left China. So families who left mainland China for, Hong Kong, Taiwan, or abroad with real assets in tow often preserved generational wealth, and they were at least able to survive. Still they had to like move somewhere else and restart in some way, but at least it wasn't just a foregone conclusion that you're just going to inevitably lose all of it by staying in China. And of course, investor lessons for China versus today. Forced currency reforms that compensate gold or forex, or just foreign currencies, at a fixed rate are a real risk in extreme crises. Capital controls and patriotic financial decrees are not conspiracy. They're historical precedent. Again, we've seen this a lot of times. We've even seen it in the U.S. The U.S. government in the 1930s confiscated everyone's gold. Like, it was popular too, by the way. It was like a popular decision. We did a small part of a video on that. Maybe go into more detail at a later time. But anyways, don't assume the state won't force convert assets if things get bad enough. That's why having some assets offshore, if you can, some in non-custodial form, perhaps like Bitcoin, some in jurisdictions with stronger rule of law, although it's always going to be a risk in the hands of someone else, is rational risk management, not paranoia. So in today, what makes most sense, in my opinion, Bitcoin is a big one, just because it's very easy to use in this regard. If you can invest in foreign capital markets, that can be okay, but you do have other risks, and risks exist with Bitcoin as well. Of course, the volatility is pretty nasty for a lot of people, but these are the other options. They might not be the best options, but it's certainly preferable to fucking staying in China and just having your everything hyperinflated away to where you literally have zero value. I mean, that's just devastation. Anyways, regime change is often preceded by monetary betrayal or of the regime's own middle class. That's when people flip politically, of course, naturally. Once you fuck with the middle class, that's when you get a revolution. Anyways, let's move on to Yugoslavia. This was from 1992 to 1994. This is their dinara. This is a 500 billion note. So you could be a billionaire. You just live in fucking Yugoslavia and it buys maybe half of a loaf of bread. But you could be a billionaire. Just be careful what you wish for, right? So, the funny thing is like, or maybe not funny thing, but just thing to highlight here. It's like people call Elon Musk a billionaire, and he is a billionaire, but he's not a billionaire because he has $1 billion in his bank account. Very few rich people hold a shit ton of money in their bank account in US dollars. What they hold is they hold their assets. And in his case, he holds this company, which is worth $1 billion, or many billions of dollars, obviously. But my point is that the worth is the company, not the currency. The worth is the company, not the currency. That's the company is the golden goose that lays the golden egg, and the currency is just the fucking shit farts that come out after that. Anyways, lead up to the disaster here. Disintegration and sanctions. The old Yugoslavia is breaking apart. Wars in Croatia and Bosnia. The new Federal Republic of Yugoslavia faces international sanctions, cutting it off from normal financing. Economic activity collapses, tax revenues evaporate. The government funds war, social benefits, and state-owned enterprises by printing dinars. Again, they have a bunch of wars. They have a bunch of social benefits. And state-owned businesses, how do they fund them? They print their fucking currency. They print. Hyperinflation runs from March 1992 to January 1994, which is, a little bit under 2 years. Peak monthly inflation in January 1994 was 313 million%. Again, it doesn't even matter what it is at this point. Daily inflation, by the way. Fucking daily. Daily inflation was 62%. So, great. Again, war plus sanctions plus deficits plus printing equals currency death. Very similar to Weimar Republic in Germany. And I do want to take a moment to apologize for my stutter. I don't know why I've been studying so much recently, but just really fucking annoying, very embarrassing. Anyways, everyday life when people stop believing in prices. So this is what it was like for the everyday person. Prices change multiple times per day. Some shops quote in points pegged to the Deutsche Mark, basically Germany's currency, the mark, because nobody trusts dinars. Paychecks are almost meaningless. By the time you cash them, they've lost a huge chunk of value. People spend money the instant they get it, just to turn it into food, fuel, or DM. So ultimately, I just want to highlight this again because it's like you're forced to buy instantly. In the case of a CBDC, it'll be programmatically done this way, and this is not like a fucking conspiracy theorist. Like, they have spoken about this. We'll have money that expires after some date. This is the same thing. The effect is the same. Your money is so worthless, within a few hours that you just have to spend it right now, right fucking now. So it makes me wonder, like, what's going on there? GDP collapses by 30% in 1993. Industrial output falls sharply. Unemployment soars. A massive gray or black market economy appears, with smuggling gasoline, trading cigarettes, foreign currency and goods, paying bribes just to access, basic goods like your fucking toilet paper and food, for your daily needs. Emotionally, what was it like? People describe this period as living in permanent chaos. Not fucking great. There is always the war between chaos and order. You want to be in the middle, but if I have to be more on the side of one, it would be order, honestly. Chaos, very, very bad, very, very nasty to deal with. Money is no longer a store of value or a unit of account. It's just a rapidly shrinking claim you must dump ASAP, basically, like immediately. Anyways, who won big in Yugoslavia? Those holding Deutsche Marks in other foreign currencies as well. The Deutsche Mark DM became the real currency. Stores priced it in unofficially. So it was like, yeah, you were supposed to pay your stuff in the Yugoslavian currency, but stores would just put out the Deutsche Mark, the DM price instead because it's a little bit more stable. It's similar to what some African nations or Southern American nations, using the U.S. dollar unofficially to facilitate payments rather than their national currency. Anyways, families with relatives abroad sending Deutsche Marks had a huge advantage. I'll just refer to it as DM, by the way. Smugglers and black market operators, fuel, cigarettes, imported goods, all brought in across borders and sold at massive markups. They won big. This is a lot more nastier, though, to be fair. This kind of does look like price gouging, which is not good. They took on legal physical risk, but made fortunes relative to locals. People who stockpiled goods early, again, this is where I think most of us can kind of prepare for. Businesses or individuals who bought inventory like food, building materials, clothing before the worst phase, and then repriced it in DM terms could survive and profit. Those who pivoted fast when stabilization finally arrived. So after the whole hyperinflation ended in 1994, the Avromosic, it's just the A program, stabilized the currency. Those with foreign savings and functioning businesses could restart on stronger footing. So they ended up doing well, but still, they went through a lot of pain. Anyways, investor lessons that we can take from Yugoslavia to today. In a real breakdown, the parallel market becomes the true economy. If you're not thinking in a harder unit like the US dollar, you might even say that not right now, but compared to a lot of other foreign currencies, it is still much, 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 much better than them. In terms of fiat currencies, the US dollar is still the best one. But gold or Bitcoin, you're the mark. Sanctions and fragmentation can push a state into printing as the default. This is relevant for any country that loses access to external funding or reserve currency privileges. Having foreign income streams like an online business, remote work, global clients is one of the best hedges you can own. Again, you're just getting paid from somewhere else. So that certainly does help. And here's a nice little chart of Yugoslavia's hyperinflation here. I'm gonna take a sip of this water while you check that one out. Just fucking insane, man. Like the numbers go so high, I don't even know how to read them. Anyways, next we'll go over Zimbabwe. This is a lot more recent, from 2007 to 2009. Destroyed agriculture, destroyed the currency. Anyways, the lead up to this event, and let's just go back here. Let's just focus on this. I really like this picture right here because it's in color and it looks a lot more relatable just because they're black. But because, and I'm also black. It looks a lot more relatable just because it looks like a more modern picture rather than the black and white that we typically see. So you can really kind of see this happening. They have cars in the background that you would recognize. But this guy's, carrying around a fucking wheelbarrow of cash. And what is that worth? Probably next to nothing, to be honest with you. So that's my point. You can really put yourself in this guy's shoes and be like, holy shit, I need to tie down all my money in a wheelbarrow with literally ropes because it's piled up so high. But what is it going to fucking buy? Almost nothing. Anyways, the lead up to this incident, destroying your food supply, then printing, basically, in essence. Early 2000s, the government executes violent land seizures from commercial, mostly white farmers for whatever reason. I don't really actually know much about that portion of it. Destroying the backbone of the agricultural sector. I don't want to turn this into like a race thing. I just want to acknowledge that what we had here is the government. Maybe they're white, maybe they're black, who the fuck cares? But the government executes violent land seizures. So they basically took people's private property, especially the farmers, which destroyed the backbone of the agricultural sector. And if you don't know much about farming, which I don't know much about farming, but my uncle is a farmer in a way, and so I've learned a little bit, and it is it's a very specialized skill. Like you can't just replace it instantly. It takes a lot of knowledge, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of expertise to do properly. And without that, what happens? Well, if you don't have any farmers producing fucking food, what happens to your food supply? Goes away. I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. Anyways, agricultural output collapses, exports plummet, foreign currency inflows dry up. The government keeps subsidies and state spending going via printing Zimbabwean dollars. So again, government just decides to print in order to paper over this issue. Inflation accelerates into true hyperinflation by 2007 to 2008. The peak month, almost 80 billion% inflation in November 2008. Again, it's just, the numbers it doesn't even matter. It's worthless. Prices doubling roughly every 24 to 25 hours. Like. Yeah, good luck with that, man. Anyways, everyday life, society runs on US dollars and barter. So they actually did, unofficially go to the US dollar. A 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note can't buy a simple bus fare. Insane. And how would you even pay that to the bus? Like, you go to the bus with your wheelbarrow of cash and like, hey, sir, can you take all this? And he's like, I have nowhere to put all this. So no. Like, it's not like they have fucking credit cards, to run it up on an imaginary bank account. But no, it's like there are literal issues with even accepting it at that point. Shops are either empty or constantly repricing. Some refuse local currency entirely. People queue for hours for bread, fuel, basic items. Again, just like you're trying to go get your daily, your daily gallon of milk. I wouldn't do that because I'm fucking, what's it called? I can't have dairy, whatever that is called. Anyways, but you're going there and you're waiting hours in a line just to fucking get it. I mean, that sucks. That just sucks. Salaries become symbolic. Many professionals quit formal jobs to trade or farm or to hustle. Hospitals lack supplies. Teachers and nurses leave or demand payment in dollars, fuel, or food. Emotionally, for the average person, it's humiliation and exhaustion. Constant survival mode. How are you going to survive on this day? How are you going to get the food on this day? It's it's an adventure every fucking day, not in a good way. For the middle class, it's the realization my degrees don't matter. My bank account is a joke. Only what I can trade today matters. I think we have one of those already. my degrees don't really matter. Again, some of these people were like doctors and lawyers and engineers and whatnot. And at that point, it's like you're getting paid in a worthless currency. What are you going to do? You're going to quit doing that. So then not only do you quit doing that, but like now the country loses their experts, their professional class, because there's no motivation to continue to do that job. I mean, it doesn't matter if they pay you 100 million bajillion of those, currencies. It's worthless. 100 trillion Zimbabwe note can't buy a fucking bus fare. I dare ask, like, what would buy a house there, during that time? So who won big in Zimbabwe? Those with access to foreign currencies like the US dollar or the African rand. I believe it's the South African rand. Business owners with foreign clients or remittances. Individuals with cash stashes in US dollars could buy assets for pennies in real terms. So if you did have a foreign currency that was stable, like the US dollar, just any other stable currency, then yeah, you win big. When your national currency is just hyperinflating, I mean, it's worthless while you're actually holding something that does have worth. So yeah, gold panners and those in resource sectors. So people mining or trading gold and selling it for dollars did very well, actually. Cross-border traders, they'd buy goods in South Africa or Botswana in hard currency, bring them into Zimbabwe, and then sell at huge markups in Zimbabwe dollars or US dollars, probably, better. People who who bought real estate or productive assets with worthless Zimbabwe dollars just before dollarization. So when Zimbabwe abandoned its own currency and allowed foreign currencies in 2009, those who had turned paper into land or buildings or business equipment found themselves owning real things priced in US dollars. And again, you own a real thing. You own a real thing. That's the key here. You own a real thing. Anyways, investor lessons that we can draw from Zimbabwe to today. If a state destroys its productive base, your food, energy industry, then hyperinflation becomes a real risk, not because of money printing alone, but because there's nothing left to buy with that money. If your income is in a weak currency, but your consumption basket is global, you're in danger even before hyperinflation hits, by the way. Having even a small stash in a harder unit like dollars, gold, Bitcoin can be the difference between disaster and opportunity when locals are liquidating real assets to survive. And now we go to Venezuela, and I believe this is the last one as well. Yeah, I'm running out of slides here. And again, here's a nice chart of hyperinflation in the petro state. By the way, Venezuela used to be very, very rich as a country. It wasn't that long ago when they were actually among the most richest nations. Not the richest, but among them. Anyways, lead up: oil addiction and political denial. So Venezuela is an oil monoculture. When oil prices are high and production is stable, the state can fund massive subsidies and social spending, which they do because it's communist more or less, or socialist at least. Years of mismanagement and underinvestment plus corruption erode production capacity. Oil price crashes and international sanctions hammer export revenues and access to dollars. Instead of cutting spending or reforming, the government prints bolivars, which is their national currency, to maintain subsidies and pay workers. So again, they don't tighten their belt. What they do is they print the money. Inflation accelerates into hyperinflation. So, for example, 2016, they had 274% inflation. I mean, that's already like really fucking bad. Okay. Like that's disastrous already. By 2017, it's 863%. And by 2018, it is more than 130,000% inflation. Amazing. Fucking great. Again, single commodity dependence plus political denial plus money printing equals very bad situation for the everyday person. Anyways, here's what it looks like for the average person. Shelves run empty or are stocked with goods nobody can afford. So it's either not available or you just can't afford it. Equally as bad for both. People lose 10 to 20 kilos on average. If you're an American, you don't speak kilogram, that's close to 20 to even, or it's about 20 to 45 pounds. 20 to 45 pounds. I mean, look, I think us Americans could probably do a little bit of that. Not gonna lie, but in Venezuela, yeah, it was a lack of consistent food, and this is known as the Maduro diet. So this is when Maduro was in power, which he actually still is in power. In fact, a lot of issues between Maduro and the Trump administration right now. Electricity and water became unreliable. Public services decay. Professionals like engineers, doctors, teachers earn wages that can't feed their families. Many immigrate, so a lot of them come to the States, for example. Doctors and engineers, you definitely think that they would be able to earn a wage for their family. Teachers, a little bit less so. I mean, they don't get paid as much usually, but still, we can include them in this because, yes, they got fucked as well. The black market dollar rate becomes the true inflation gauge. Official rates are a joke. Informal work explodes. People sell anything like arepas, cigarettes, crafts to get a few dollars. Emotionally, the sense is we lived in an oil-rich country and ended up poorer than our grandparents. Again, just that sort of notion of future generations doing worse than past generations. Very, 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 very destructive, especially emotionally. Deep anger at the elites who insulated themselves in Caracas, which I believe is one of the richer portions there, while the rest of the country collapsed. Who won big in Venezuela? So those who paid in dollars or with foreign income or remittances, so like freelancers, international contractors, people with relatives abroad, their dollar income translated into exploding purchasing power locally. So again, this one's shown up a lot of times in past examples as well. Business owners who dollarized early, so shops, restaurants, and importers who quietly price in dollars, even if they pretended to use bolivars on papers, because again, it would have been illegal there. Like they, are an adversary of the U.S. So while the people wanted to use U.S. dollars because they were stable, they had to be very hush-hush and quiet about it. But yeah, these people did do okay, assuming they didn't get caught, assuming they didn't get caught because that was illegal. Early adopters of crypto, actually, and dollar banking. So some Venezuelans used Bitcoin or stable coins as a bridge to get paid in crypto, immediately swap to dollars or spend directly. They bypassed the bolivar entirely. So these people did quite well. And asset accumulators during peak panic. Again, these people have done well historically. Those who could buy property, equipment, or inventory from desperate sellers using dollars ended up owning distressed assets at huge discounts. And some investor lessons that we can draw from Venezuela to today. So if your country's economy is dependent on one or two key sectors. So for Venezuela, that was oil, basically oil, but in the US, we have oil, tech, tourism, these sort of things, and they collapse, or especially the tech sector in the US would be a big one. The tech sector is kind of like our main thing. Politicians will almost always choose to debase over default. which we're kind of seeing right now. I mean, even though the tech sector is not failing right now, but they're still debasing the currency anyways. Being plugged into the global economy via remote work, online businesses, or portable skills is the single strongest hedge that a lot of people can do. Crypto and alternative rails are not theoretical. They've already been lifelines in real collapses, not just in Venezuela. We've actually seen it in many other countries recently as well, Turkey being one of them, and many other South American and African countries. Especially. Anyways, let's tie it all together. The winner's playbook. So across Weimar, Hungary, China, Yugoslavia, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, the patterns are absurdly consistent. Here's what I noticed. What destroyed people? Trusting bank deposits and local currency bonds. Basically, if you save in fiat currencies, you're fucked. You get fucked. You get your pants pulled down and you get a massive red dildo just shoved up your angus, and it's so fucking long that it goes through your intestines, into your stomach, through your heart, into your lungs, through your esophagus, and back out your mouth. That's what actually happens. Relying 100% on a salary in the local currency. Also not great. Also, unfortunately, what most people are dependent on. Having no foreign or hard asset exposure. It doesn't have to be foreign. I think hard asset probably more important because all foreign fiat currencies do have this as a major risk. Believing they would never let it get that bad. Just people thinking, well, that happened to someone else. That's why I want to show you pictures here of people that this has happened to and bring you through those emotions, because we always just think, oh, that's someone else. That couldn't happen here because I haven't seen it happen. Yes, but it has happened. It's just not in your lifetime, or it happened somewhere else. But it can happen. It can happen anywhere. So what the winners did, intentionally or by luck, they owned productive real assets. So that could be land, housing, productive businesses, inventory, food, energy assets, these sort of things. Very, very important because they have natural value or inherent value. They used leverage in the dying currency. So if you take out a loan in a currency that is dying, then, you more or less don't have to repay as much or really anything at all if the currency just hyperinflates away. So fixed rate debt that got inflated away paired with real assets. They held external or harder money. So gold, dollars, Swiss francs, later Bitcoin, and other non-sovereign assets are very common. Built or already had foreign income streams. So like export businesses, international work, remittances, these sort of things. Or they moved. They literally just moved. They got the fuck out of that country if they could. But this is, again, not relevant to everyone. They got out of the local currency into assets and just physically moved out of the country if they could. So some modern corollaries for the U.S. Again, I don't want to have any doom porn here. I want to reiterate, we are not in hyperinflation. This is not a hyperinflation time right now for the U.S. We have had some periods of higher inflation during 2021 and a little bit in 2022, but we are not in hyperinflation. 9% is significantly different than 9 million %, as we've seen in some cases. The most realistic path is persistent elevated inflation plus financial repression, not Hungarian-style instant meltdown. Oh, and I should also acknowledge, sorry, I missed one point here. Do we have structural deficits, political incentives to print, rising distrust, and a middle class being slowly squeezed? Actually, yes. Okay, so that is there. It's just not at a breaking point yet. But the most realistic path, again, is persistent elevated inflation plus financial repression. So it does take multiple years of this very, very high persistent inflation for these meltdowns to really get going into hyperinflation. But the lessons are the same. Regardless of whether you're experiencing that or not, the way to build wealth is the same. Don't store your life in a single government IOU, aka fiat currencies. Own claims on real productivity, like equities, land, quality businesses, Bitcoin as a monetary asset. Use rule-based systems to accumulate scarce assets over time instead of reacting emotionally to headlines. Have a system, have some sort of governing principle that leads you towards the right investments, even when it doesn't feel right, during these emotionally distressing times. Aim to be one of the people with optionality, again, meaning foreign income, diversified assets, portable skills. These are where people can win. And then, of course, what I'm doing, as promised earlier, I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing. I don't know if it's going to be perfect, but historically, this is what I've gathered for myself as the best course of action. Assets are the value that fiat is measured against. Therefore, I want to accumulate assets in the form of stocks, gold, Bitcoin, and real estate. Not necessarily in that order. But all of those I do like. Real estate, I like the least out of all of these. Gold and Bitcoin, I think, are probably going to be the best ones, and stocks are going to be the easiest, but they might have an issue during these times. I'm not sure. If you own the business, theoretically, it should do well during these times because the business is what has value, not the fiat currency. So they should go up in value, meaning that if you do hold those stocks, theoretically, it should work out very, very well for you. But if the whole system collapses, then are those companies still going to be profitable? When no one else can actually buy their shit? Well, I would imagine that's going to be a potential issue. Anyways, so this is also just one of the reasons why I created the LTI tool, the long-term investing tool. I wanted to codify this playbook for people who don't know how to systematize it, including myself. When I get those signals to buy, I can just give you a quick insight to it over here. But when I get these signals to buy, regardless of how bad it feels, I'll just buy. I'll just fucking buy. This is a more aggressive dip buyer right here. And by the way, this code is probably not going to work anymore because the sale period is over. There'll be another one in the future anyways. But anyways, when I get signals to buy in value areas for very long-term investments, it doesn't necessarily feel good. These are usually during, severe corrections and downside moves. I'm buying into weakness more or less. But I trust that over time, if I accumulate these things, they will have the value when I actually need it, So again, this one's very aggressive right here. So it's buying a lot of these downside moves, but I also have ones that are a lot more, conservative and just looking for macro lows. And the purpose of that really is to just grab onto those and specialize in certain areas. And again, I need to be very, very clear in my purpose here. When I'm making these investments, I'm looking to hold them for 5 years minimum, and 10 years is what I really have bookmarked in my head. So I would say, if you are going to follow something like this, make sure that you understand it's a long-term thing. If you're buying this for a quick trade, it's possible that it might not work out. Now, of course, during a bull market, it will work out, but I also want to be buying during the bear market. So I will buy these moves to the downside when I get those signals. That's just the way that I operate. Again, I'm not looking for that trade to go immediately in profit. I'm looking for it in 5 years at minimum, which so far has done incredibly well. But again, it has to be more of a long-term thing. Anyways, so the way that I typically do it when it comes to investing in equities, just the major indices, more or less, very boring stuff, and then also Bitcoin and a little bit of gold, is that I do a very, very, very small, microscopic amount of weekly dollar cost averaging. But when I get these signals on the LTI here, then I will hammer the bid with a lot more size. And I trust that over time that does quite well. And for the results that we do have, it does incredibly well. Anyways, what looks extremes, and it's very, very important. You can't just do that with any asset, by the way. If you do that with a shitcoin, it's a down only chart. You have to do it with an uptrending asset over a long period of time. Anyways, just want to reiterate the essence of this presentation. What looks extreme has happened 16 times in major countries within the past 100 years. Already. Many of them already within your lifetime, by the way. The winners always did similar things to generate massive wealth every single time. Buy assets, don't save in the, in your national currency. And if you can get paid in a foreign currency, do that as well. But own the assets is the main thing that I think almost anyone can do, especially if you live in the Western world, especially the US. You do have an opportunity to invest in capital markets, which are still the best in the world by and far away, by a large margin. Anyways, I'll leave you with this one chart here. No, we are not in hyperinflation, but I do want to show you the money supply. It's growing consistently year over year. That is by design. And yes, a small amount of inflation actually is okay. It is okay. 2% inflation, which is the target, which probably not going to get down there, or at least from what I understand, it's a little bit more difficult right now. That actually can be okay. But when you go through these periods over here, when you add so much money, like from especially 2020 to current times, 40% of the outstanding money supply was added after 2020. That is going to devalue your currency. Again, this is just reducing purchasing power right now. It's not hyperinflation. It is high inflation, but not hyperinflation. It's still far away from that. But you can see that once things get going, it can become a runaway train, and that is scary. And it very much does keep me up at night sometimes. But the best way that I've found by studying history to fight this is, again, focus on accumulating assets. The best way that I found to accumulate assets is to very small weekly DCA into uptrending long-term assets. Not shitcoins, not individualistic stocks, but just the big indices, and then gold and Bitcoin. And then, yeah, if you want to buy a house, buy a fucking house, I guess. Because, if you do take out a loan for that, it might be worthless later on anyways, because that also does work. And then I listen to my LTI when it tells me to go a little bit bigger on the buys. And that's what I'll leave you for this one. Again, I'm not saying that I'm 100% going to be right about this. I'm just saying this is my plan for what I'll be doing in the future and what I am already doing right now. And perhaps after watching this and studying a little bit yourself, maybe you'll come to similar conclusions, maybe you won't. But at the end of the day, I hope that this was in some way valuable to you. I'll continue producing within this series. I've really enjoyed it. And other than that, just want to say, I'd like to wish you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.